I knew the morning was headed somewhere ugly the moment my new manager strutted into the payroll office with a grin that did not match the hour. The fluorescent lights were still flickering awake. The coffee in my cup was still too hot to drink. And yet he looked at me like he had been waiting all week for this performance. I had seen that expression before on executives who believed titles made them intelligent. Something told me he had brought an audience. I was right. My name is Maribel, and for 12 years, I was the quiet backbone of our company. Not the face of anything, not the voice in meetings, not the person whose name got brought up in quarterly reviews. But every paycheck that hit every account passed through my hands. Every correction, every deduction, every audit request, every frantic message on payday. I knew the system better than anyone else because I had been the one to build half of it from scratch when the company upgraded software and never hired a single trainer. The supervisors depended on me. The departments depended on me. The entire financial rhythm of the building depended on me, which is why the moment my manager walked in with a teenage-looking boy in a wrinkled polo shirt, I felt a cold thread of unease tighten along my spine. He was not just showing the kid around. He had a swagger that said he was about to violate common sense. The boy drifted behind him, chewing gum loudly and dragging his fingers across my filing cabinets like he was inspecting a museum. My manager stopped by my desk and clapped his hands once, a sound that cracked the air. "Maribel," he said, stretching my name like it amused him. "Meet my son, Zeke. He is going to be taking over payroll." I felt my body freeze, the way you freeze when you hear glass breaking in another room. My heartbeat did not panic. It simply stopped for a moment, suspended in disbelief. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. It never came. Instead, he laughed. A hollow bark that echoed in the cubicle. "Come on, Maribel. You have been here forever. You do great work, but you know how it is. The company is moving forward. New systems, new ideas. We need people who can keep up with the time." His gaze swept over me like I was an outdated appliance. "You are a flip phone in a smartphone world." The humiliation hit hot, then cold, then strangely calm. 12 years. 12 years of staying late, coming in early, fixing other departments' mistakes, preventing fines, preventing lawsuits, preventing disasters no one ever knew almost existed. 12 years of being the dependable one, the unproblematic one, the employee who never demanded anything, and he dismissed me with a single sentence and a smirk meant to impress his son. The boy slid into my chair, spinning once, opening random payroll windows like they were apps on a game screen. He did not ask what any of them were. He did not care. He gave me a sideways grin, like a challenge. "This chair is mine now." My manager walked, off without another word, as if he had already forgotten I existed. I sat there for a moment, hands folded in my lap, letting the wave of insult settle instead of crash. I did not argue. I did not plead. I did not remind him of the regulations I followed to the letter or the audits I navigated single-handedly or the files only I could interpret. I watched the boy click freely through sensitive tax data, his gum popping like punctuation to every violation he committed. My stomach twisted, not with nerves, but with a slow blooming clarity. I saw the future of that morning. I saw exactly how it would play out. And for the first time in years, I felt something like freedom stretching inside my chest. I stood up, smoothed my blouse, and walked to the break room for coffee. I did not hurry. I did not look back at the boy who was already one mistake away from disaster. Humiliation has a flavor. Bitter, metallic, unforgettable. But it also has another taste beneath it. One you only recognize when it finally settles: power. Because I knew something he did not. By lunch, he would destroy the system his father had stolen from me, and I would not lift a finger to stop it. By the next morning, the air in the payroll office felt different, as if the walls themselves sensed something fragile was about to crack. I arrived on time, coffee in hand, and found Zeke already at my desk with his headphones around his neck, and a confidence far larger than his understanding of our system. He greeted me with a lazy wave while clicking through screens that normally required careful attention. The kind that comes only from years of trial, error, and memorized procedures. I had spent more than a decade learning the language of those menus, the quirks of the software, The places where one wrong keystroke could obliterate weeks of work. Zeke dove in as if he were browsing a game. I set my coffee down and watched for a moment, saying nothing. The cursor flew across tabs that should not be opened in that order, and his fingers tapped keys with the reckless rhythm of someone convinced they could not break anything important. Part of me wanted to warn him, but a larger part stayed silent, remembering the words "flip phone" in a smartphone world, and feeling the sting settle like a bruise beneath my ribs. When he finally noticed me standing there, he smirked. "Relax, Maribel. I have watched plenty of tutorials. This is all pretty basic." Basic. That word almost made me laugh. Payroll was never basic. Not in a company our size. Not with the layers of state regulations and federal codes woven through each action. But I simply nodded and walked to my side table, where I kept old files. I pretended to organize them while staying close enough to hear every click. It did not take long for the danger to begin. He opened the tax configuration panel, a section explicitly marked for administrator access only. His cursor hovered over a row of fields that represented years of accumulated data. "What does this one do?" he asked, though he did not actually wait for my answer. Before the question even fully left his mouth, he hit delete. A warning window flashed across the screen, bright red with a message I had seen only twice in 12 years. It asked for confirmation to permanently remove every tax file associated with active employees. Zeke scoffed and clicked yes, assuming it was some minor prompt. The computer froze for a moment, then the screen went blank before rebooting. I felt a quiet shift inside me, something steady and deliberate. Zeke leaned forward, confused, tapping random keys as if he could undo what he had just done through sheer insistence. He restarted the program twice and received the same error message, missing tax directory. He called for his father. My manager rushed in, face tight with irritation, not fear. He barked questions at Zeke, then at me, then at the computer. His voice grew louder as he tried to blame anyone who was not his son. He accused the software, the IT department, outdated protocols, anything within reach. Never once did he consider that putting an untrained child in a critical position was the true problem. I let him rant, while the panic spread outward into the hallway and toward the departments waiting for reports. People began gathering near the cubicles, whispering about errors, rejections, and missing information. I sat at my small auxiliary desk, sipping my coffee, observing the chaos that bloomed like a slow-moving fire. Every question thrown my way was met with a neutral expression. Every demand to help was treated with the same calm stillness. I was no longer responsible for the disaster. He had made that clear. I was a flip phone, remember. Someone like me should not interfere in the world of smartphones. Around midday, after hours of frantic troubleshooting, the realization finally settled over the room. The system was not broken. It was empty. Payroll could not run. Taxes could not be calculated. Audits would fail. The company was suddenly exposed. My manager's face drained of color. Zeke sat frozen, hands limp on the keyboard. I stood, gathered my purse, and slipped on my jacket. Then I walked to the time clock, pressed the button, listened to the soft confirmation beep, and allowed a small, quiet smile to form as I stepped outside. The collapse did not arrive in a single dramatic moment. It unfolded slowly, like a structure that had been rotting for years, and finally met the right amount of pressure. By the time I woke the next morning, the first cracks had already begun to show. I saw them through the notifications lighting up my phone in frantic clusters. Missed calls from the office, from the supervisor, from payroll representatives who had barely spoken to me in months. I let the phone vibrate until it fell silent. I had taken exactly 1 day to breathe freely, and I was not giving that up for anyone. By mid-morning, the messages shifted from confusion to urgency. Employees were reporting incorrect net pay, missing deductions, and vanished tax withholdings. The system was pushing out rejection codes that only I recognized, codes that meant foundational data was missing, corrupted, or deleted completely. I imagined them scrambling through binders I had organized over the course of 12 years, opening tabs with labels they never bothered to learn. It felt surreal to drink my coffee while knowing chaos was blooming in the place I had held together by muscle memory and intuition. Around noon, the supervisor sent a lengthy voicemail explaining that auditors were demanding answers for data discrepancies that spanned the entire fiscal year. The words urgent and immediate appeared over and over, along with phrases like potential penalties and compliance review. My manager's voice joined the chorus of panic shortly after, leaving a message filled with forced calm that slipped every time he exhaled. He insisted everything was fine, while his tone betrayed the opposite. He asked me to return just to walk them through a few things, as if a few things could repair a system gutted from the inside. I listened to none of it in the moment. I simply observed the notifications appear like tiny lights on a sinking ship. My silence became its own form of gravity. With each hour that passed without my voice, the weight on them grew heavier. The first state notice arrived the next morning. I knew the schedule by heart. Every quarter, the state sent automated reminders of required filings, but when data failed to match prior submissions, the notices escalated. The message forwarded to me contained a red-flagged alert indicating a potential audit. That alone should have sent my manager into full crisis mode, yet he tried to downplay it in another voicemail, insisting that the system must have glitched and that he and Zeke were working on it. His denial tasted desperate. I spent the afternoon reading a novel in my living room while my phone buzzed across the table. I refused every call. I refused every apology. I refused every attempt to lure me back with promises of temporary help or extra hours, or even desperate pleas that sounded suspiciously like confessions. They had made their decision. Now they were living in it. By the third day, employees began reaching out to me directly. Not management, not supervisors, but regular workers who remembered my face from long lines on payday and from patient explanations during benefit enrollments. They sent messages asking if I was all right, asking if I was coming back, asking if the rumors about payroll failure were true. Their concern felt genuine. Their frustration felt earned. I answered none of them, though I read every word carefully. They deserved better than the chaos my manager had unleashed, but saving them would mean saving him. And I was not ready to offer redemption to someone who had treated me like disposable machinery. Late in the evening, my phone rang again, this time from the company's compliance officer. Her voicemail held none of the frantic energy of the others. She sounded controlled, professional, and deeply uneasy. She explained that external auditors were now scheduled for a visit. She asked if there was anything I could clarify about recent system activity. Her final sentence lingered in my thoughts long after the message ended. We have reason to believe that critical knowledge was never documented, and that you may be the only person who understands the full structure of the payroll system. I sat with that truth, letting it settle over me like warm water. It was not ego, it was fact. The house of cards was falling because I had been the foundation, not the flip phone. The system had never been bigger than me. I had been the system. My phone buzzed again. I turned it face down on the table. In the quiet that followed, I finally allowed myself to feel the smallest spark of satisfaction, not for their suffering, but for the clarity of what had always been true. They were finally learning the cost of taking. 3 days after I walked out, the breaking point arrived with a quiet inevitability that felt almost ceremonial. I woke to sunlight on my curtains and a phone vibrating nonstop on the nightstand. I did not rush to grab it. I let it ring through a half-dozen calls before finally lifting it, not to answer, but to watch the notifications stack across the screen like falling dominoes. The executives were calling now, not supervisors, not managers, not coworkers. The people who spent years pretending payroll ran itself had finally discovered what happened when the person behind the curtain stepped away. Still, I answered none of them. I placed the phone face down and made myself breakfast, letting the house stay peaceful while their building unraveled. By mid-morning, an unfamiliar number tried again. This time, a voicemail followed. The voice belonged to an executive I had only met twice in 12 years, a man who usually spoke in clipped sentences designed to intimidate. Now he sounded cautious, choosing his words with the care of someone who had just realized how deep the hole truly was. He explained that payroll was frozen entirely. No checks, no deposits, no taxes calculated. Their external accountant had flagged severe irregularities. Legal counsel was demanding explanations for missing data. The phrase potential liability repeated more than once. He ended with a request, not a demand, to speak with me when I had a moment. I replayed his message while stirring my coffee, listening for any trace of apology. There was none. Less than an hour later, another call came through, then another, until finally a text appeared, clearly from one of the executives but typed by someone unfamiliar with my number. "We need clarity, Maribel. Please contact us." The word "please" caught my attention. It was the first sign of humility I had ever seen from them. Even so, I let the silence grow a little longer. Discomfort was necessary. It carved truth out of people who preferred to look away. That afternoon, the dam finally broke. My manager called, not through the work line, but from his personal phone. His voicemail was a frantic mix of blame and panic. He insisted he had no idea how the system collapsed. He implied that I might have sabotaged it. Then his voice cracked as he admitted the executives were demanding documentation he did not have. His final sentence trembled with something close to fear. "They think I caused this." I deleted the message without saving it. 2 hours later, the executives called again. This time, I answered. I listened without interrupting as they explained the full scope of the disaster. Their tone was measured but tense, the tone of people who had finally recognized the scale of their own negligence. They asked what I knew. I offered only small facts. Nothing strategic, nothing emotional. I told them the truth in short pieces, revealing only enough to show that the system had been functional when I left. When they asked about my manager's claim that I failed to train Zeke, I simply stated that I had never been asked to train him, never been told of any transition plan, never been given the chance to document 12 years of institutional memory. They exchanged quiet sighs on the other end of the line. Eventually, they asked me to come to the office for a formal meeting. I said I would think about it. I ended the call before they could push further. The meeting happened the next morning. I walked into the conference room to find my manager already seated, pale and sweating, his son beside him with red eyes and trembling hands. The executives lined the far side of the table, folders open, expressions tight. My manager launched into a speech the moment I sat down, waving his arms as he blamed outdated procedures, confusing software, unreliable data, anything except the truth. The executives listened with strained patience until one finally cut him off and turned to Zeke. They asked what had really happened. Zeke faltered. Then he confessed. He admitted he had deleted the tax directory. He admitted he had clicked through warnings. He admitted he had insisted he could handle payroll without training. He admitted his father told him not to worry about mistakes because I would fix them if things went wrong. Silence filled the room, thick and heavy. The executives turned their attention back to me, waiting for my reaction. I gave them none. My face remained calm, my hands folded lightly in my lap. I did not gloat. I did not accuse. I did not rescue. The collapse had arrived, and I let every piece fall exactly where it belonged. Visible people for granted. The executives did not waste time once the truth surfaced. They scheduled a follow-up meeting the next morning, this one without my manager present. When I arrived, the atmosphere felt sharper, as if the building itself had grown tired of carrying his chaos. 3 executives sat across from me with folders stacked neatly in front of them, each one labeled with the kind of calm precision that always precedes decisive action. They asked me to walk them through the system one final time, not as a plea for rescue, but as a necessary step toward understanding what they had allowed to decay under their watch. I kept my explanations brief, clinical, focused only on facts. They listened quietly, taking notes and trading looks that held no softness. When they finished questioning me, they thanked me for my clarity and asked me to wait outside. I stood in the hallway for several minutes, listening to muffled voices through the glass. Eventually, the door opened and my manager was ushered in. His son trailed behind him, shoulders slumped, face blotchy from crying. There was no swagger left in either of them. The executives did not invite me back inside, but they did not close the door entirely. Through the small gap, I heard the familiar cadence of consequences arriving. They laid out the findings of their internal review, outlining each failure with deliberate precision. Unauthorized access, lack of documented training, negligent supervision, violations of internal policy, attempts to shift blame. every point was supported by evidence they had gathered, including Zeke's full admission. My manager protested weakly at first, but the protest died when one executive produced a printout of system logs, showing exactly who accessed the tax directory and exactly who confirmed the deletion. The son broke again, sobbing into his hands. His father could only stare at the table, frozen in a silence that finally resembled accountability. The executives delivered their decision plainly. He was terminated with cause, effective immediately. His son was barred from any future employment with the company and flagged in industry circles for gross negligence. No more chances, no more favoritism, no more protection. They escorted the two of them out of the building under watch, a slow walk that looked more like a surrender than a dismissal. When the elevator doors closed behind them, the entire floor seemed to exhale. The executives invited me back into the conference room, their postures noticeably different. Not deferential, but aware. Aware of what my absence had cost them, aware of what my presence had always prevented. They asked if I would consider returning to rebuild payroll. I declined. I had no desire to step back into a role that had swallowed 12 years of my life without recognition. Instead, I recommended someone from accounting, a woman named Rena, who had quietly supported me for years and understood the system better than anyone else except me. They accepted the recommendation without hesitation. I agreed to stay long enough to complete a formal transition, creating documentation, checklists, and workflows that should have existed all along. Rena shadowed me for a week, learning quickly, asking smart questions, absorbing the nuances that had taken me years to uncover. By the end of the week, she could navigate the software with a calm competence that reminded me of myself before exhaustion had carved its shape into my days. When the transition was complete, she hugged me in the break room, whispering that she would not let history repeat itself. I believed her. On my final day, I walked through the building slowly, taking in the small details I had ignored for so long. The hum of the printers, the faint smell of old coffee, the quiet buzz of fluorescent lights. All of it had once defined my routine, anchoring me in a role that required invisibility. Now it felt like a distant echo of someone I no longer was. As I stepped outside, sunlight hit my face, warm and steady. I thought about the betrayal that had pushed me out the door and about the disrespect that had sparked a collapse far larger than anyone expected. These things were not unique. They were patterns that repeated across workplaces and families and friendships. People underestimated the steady ones because steadiness looked like simplicity. They dismissed the quiet ones because quiet looked like compliance. They stepped on the reliable ones because reliability looked like weakness. But sometimes being underestimated becomes the catalyst that reveals who we really are. Revenge is never the fire that burns someone else down. It is the light that shows us our own worth, sharper and brighter than they ever imagined.